Welcome to this optional session of our CHE210 course. Both sections were invited to this, um, and I have some slides we'll go through, and it's open for any questions, comments. Certainly, um, no big protocol. We probably don't have many people with us, so your questions are probably valuable if you have them for everyone. I'm going to show my screen. Let's see. Here we go. I got a PowerPoint here. Okay. Um, so Blackboard. I hope everybody's having um, a fine time with the new Ultra. And with a few new things for this course. Hopefully, most everybody looks like they're doing okay. Um, Getting to MindTap and finding other things. I want to point out a few study aids that I mentioned earlier, but just to say that again. We have at the end of the week, starting Saturday through the end of Monday, exam one. As I mentioned earlier, the exam format is 40 questions. Um, about I think five or six of them will be short essay type. Um, some of them very similar to some of the activities in MindTap. So no, shouldn't be much of a surprise as long as you're kind of staying focused when you're doing those exercises. It's best to try to do that when you take the time to say, okay, I'm getting through this chapter or this portion of the chapter in MindTap. Really focus and think about what you're reading in the mini, whether it's a case study or a closer look, or or those little the couple of quizzes, the pre-quiz, the beginning, and the chapter review practice test. It's best to take advantage of the time you're putting to look at it, and only do that. Try to make that real useful time. Let's see. So exams are 60%. That comes out to about 14% each one of them, worth about that much. MindTap 30%, and then the rest in the discussion board. Discussion boards are really great, seeing people relate to their own experiences, answering some of the prompts, and hope everybody's finding that interesting. Some nice comments back and forth. That's what the discussion board is for, making this a little bit of interaction. It's a distance learning, but we try to make this, that we do hear from people in the class. If and people have been doing this, if there's a minor issue here and there, or something's happened, try to be very accommodating, understanding for special circumstances. If you need an extra day for something you didn't finish and the deadline snuck up on you, it's a distance learning course, and I understand sometimes that those things could happen. So find a way to keep on track. The best way probably is to really have the from our syllabus, the whatever that page 3, the schedule, we stay pretty close to that. So if you want to use just that schedule, or put it on another calendar or something if you use electronic, but be aware when an exam's coming up, which chapters you should have read, which chapter or chapters are for a given week. So this week has the two chapters in it that opened up. Well, started the 16th. That was yesterday. So the two chapters are looking at the first two of the macronutrients, carbohydrates and lipids. Lipids, of course, also known as the fats. And that follows the very interesting chapter 3 on digestion, uh, digestion, absorption, and transport. A lot of information there. Some of that you'll see have some practice questions, multiple choice questions that we'll go through here in this session. Okay. Again, any questions, just open your microphone and just shout out. It's fine. Okay. And in each of the modules have the recordings, lecture recordings for each of the chapters, and you should be finding them. In addition to those, there's some in the additional materials folder is a whole bunch of other things. Some things are just for if you're interested in reading a few things, for instance, from Dr. David Katz at Yale, very interesting, great writer. If you follow some people on LinkedIn, he's a very interesting person. That's David Katz, Katz. Very interesting. He's always writing and putting stuff putting up in LinkedIn. Very provocative discussions, and I think a very good writer. Okay, and the last the discussion that you've that just opened up that I want you to finish by the weekend or by Monday, and that's looking at some of the details of McDonald's nutrition listing, nutrition analysis. You may not have seen that if you do go into fast food, they are required in most states to put at least some minimal nutrition information. And this one you see here, this is a few years ago, some of the early postings of at least calories for each of an item, if you're putting together items and whatnot. But what I posted for you to look at is a very detailed nutrition analysis of all their menu items, and it might be surprising, maybe not, but I asked you to look at which of these would you prefer to, if you were to select something, and why. So a couple of questions about that. I just wanted to take a look at that and get a feel for what's in that if you do have fast food once in a while. One of the things in the additional resource folder are these. This is, again, it comes from the Cengage, the publisher of the textbook. Pretty detailed overview, and I call it a study guide for each of the chapters. And if you've read the chapter, thought about it, done mind tap, most of it should be familiar. And sometimes it's a little more detailed than I'd expect you to maybe respond in an essay type question, but it's good to go through this and for each of the chapters. So a good thing to look at. Also, there are these are good for review also. These are called the Whitney Study It guides. So it's another file that's in the additional resources. This was in an earlier versions of the textbook. I don't know why they didn't keep them in the last couple of versions of the textbook. We're on version 16 of this textbook. And you might have noticed, maybe not, but I'm using what I think is kind of better material or PowerPoint type material from either the 15th or 16th edition of the textbook. This was in earlier versions. They're very nice for review also and study. They remind you of the major sections that you've read about, learning about. And then they have some good questions also to review. And then at the bottom of what at least I posted here, they have the answers for them. So like multiple choice questions over here. And then there's some others like this one here. That's a kind of a short response or mini essay kind of question. And as I say in the test, when you're taking the test, what I expect in the short answer or short essay is full sentences when it's asking like discuss or list and discuss. Then it's you're expected to write a few sentences at least, thoughtful sentences, not just phrases or words, unless it says list 5 items or factors, then you could do that. But usually it's at least say something a little more than just listing. Okay, so this version, when you see this was from the 15th edition. There's not a whole lot different from the 15th to the 16th edition, rather. So I use one or the other in the PowerPoint videos that I present. So this was the first one, an overview, some interesting kind of general stuff, various factors that affects our food choices, the major classes of nutrients. So these right here, these objectives could be questions that you should be able to answer. Scientific method also. So things that maybe not be new for you, but you should be able to say something about. And so this is from the what I showed first, the outline, chapter outlines that talk about objectives. Then in the first chapter has a bunch of these acronyms that you read about, and some things in MindTap on. Important here, this comes back. We talk about this in later on chapters, chapter 9 and 18. Risk factors, this is saying what are major risk factors, for instance, high blood pressure, diet that's high in sugar. What else? Well, things related to chronic diseases. Chronic diseases, we talk about a cardiovascular disease and obesity, diabetes. The nutrients. So this in the first chapter, differentiating between what's organic, that is containing carbon, and all the other nutrients. We have minerals and water. These do not have carbon. And the vitamins are examples of organic or contain carbon. Of course, our macronutrients are also organic, like the protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Diet or eating pattern and health. important to know that in those top 10 consistently that are major causes of death that are at least assigned to individuals that die. Heart disease, cancer, strokes, diabetes are the five up there, have many correlations and maybe even causation studies attributing to eating pattern and towards these causes of death in the top 10. Chapter 2, planning eating patterns. Those principles that those building blocks that I showed a little earlier, the six principles, including things like variation, varying diet, nutrient density, calorie control, those types of things. Eating plan. Nutrient density, of course, there'll be one or two questions about that. Know that that's kind of relative to the calorie content that we get, and we need that, but also how much of those calories also packed with the other nutrients like vitamins and minerals and fiber also. Moderation, variety. So these are these six principles. Okay, just another way to remember these. Probably won't. Maybe I'll ask talk about three of them, three that you could think of, because they do. That you can say they overlap, but the ideas of moderation, variety. So you might say, well, balance. Balance is very similar to variety, perhaps. Adequacy. Uh, so if you aren't familiar with food labels and also the mind tap activity of diet and wellness, if you eat, and most of us at least sometimes eats, consumes or uses food from packages that are required to have nutrient facts labels, it's important to understand these and know what is necessary to be on a label, what are these facts based on. Of course, it's based on a 2,000 kcal per day eating pattern or diet, and that's a middle of the road number, 2,000 kcals. And if you're up to date with your diet and wellness, you have an idea of maybe what you're averaging. Maybe you knew that, and how much your activity and everything else, just your basal metabolic rate, how many kcals do you use? And the basic principle that if we want to put on muscle or weight of some type, then we need to consume a little more kcals and maybe protein than we use in our activity and our basal metabolic rate. If we're trying to, on the other hand, lose weight, then it's the reverse. We want to intake less kcals than we burn. Just want to point out, and probably know this, when there's a capital C, that translates into kilocalories, so 1,000 calories. And usually we don't talk about lowercase c's, and sometimes that's confusing to now someone that's not familiar with, say, nomenclature in the sciences. But kcals equals a capital C in calories. All right, so that's Michael Pollan, very important science writer, knows a whole lot, has published a whole lot, and his kind of straightforward, no-nonsense statements there. And it's good to keep in mind, eat food not too much and mostly plants. No, and chapter 3 has a lot of content, and one that you should kind of go back to and try to, because this all these, when we look at individual macronutrients, a lot of it still goes back to what we learned in chapter 3. And this is we talk about in this chapter. We talk about digestive hormones, some of our anatomy, some physiology. So a whole lot to take in here. You've and it's nice to put together what we know about anatomy and what we've learned maybe in taking courses now or have recently taken courses. Really, it is important to know our machinery that we have and how it works a bit, and it's makes everything more interesting. We can discuss things in better conversations, perhaps with a physician, if we want to exchange and learn from her or him. And of course, the GI tract, gastrointestinal tract, is kind of this tube that one could say is not internal, but kind of goes through us, and just all the processing that goes on there that we take in the mouth, and what could happen in the mouth. We have some enzymes in the juices, secretions in the mouth. Then it it starts to be massacrated, and then down the esophagus starts to be dissolved with needs water and mucus and the motions of the esophagus. It starts as just kind of stuff that enters the stomach, where it starts to, at least the proteins become starts to become with the acid and churning and the secretions in the stomach, the enzymes pepsinogen and pepsin and other protein digesting enzymes, starts to become that stuff we call chyme, and that goes into the small intestine, the duodenum, where lots of stuff goes on here, a lot of other enzyme secretions from the pancreas, and a good part of digestion happens there, and absorption starts there also in the duodenum and a little bit more down the small intestine. And the essential nutrients, those are nutrients that we need to take in on a regular basis. Our body needs them, and we don't make them or don't make enough of them. So we need them on a regular basis. There's about 40 or so, and you've come across a number of them already. The macronutrients. There's a chapter later on that talks more about the importance of water and other things. The next chapter, chapter 7, talks about proteins and amino acids that make them up. In chapter 6, we talk about lipids. We mentioned these essential fatty acids. They have have double bonds. They have their unsaturation points that are important for a variety of other building and healthy cell membranes and heart protection, sort of thing. So those are the essential amino acids, the so-called beta alpha, beta fatty acids. Okay. What else want to do here? Okay, so we have big chapters on the fat soluble vitamins and water soluble vitamins. There will come up. Fiber, also a nutrient. And digestion is just a breakdown of food into nutrients that can be absorbed. If we don't, for some reason, we don't have these enzymes excreted or working properly, then we'll have lack of absorption of those nutrients, and slowly could have deficiencies. Yeah, there could be challenges to digestion. A good question would be, what can you talk about one challenge, and where would that happen that might interrupt or inhibit digestion? So you could think of what are the steps in digestion. So we got a whole number of things there that where things could not operate properly or to the fullest extent, and that could be indigestion. Back up there, indigestion. And some people have sensitivities to certain types of foods or ingredients in foods. A number of them listed here. And to the order things. So we have mouth, esophagus, and what? Stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and anus. So the main GI hormones, they are produced somewhere and they're sent out to stimulate something to happen or to stop. These three are the the major hormones there: gastrin, secretin, and cholecystokinin, or CCK. And a really important graphic, or table rather, in your book. So know the workings of these digestive hormones, where they work, what do they do, what organ do they act on primarily. And so this is example of feedback loops. This is not from the there's something like this in the text. But for instance, for hormones, if you're asked, okay, what enzyme is working and what's going on? Well, it's gastrin in that case, in the stomach, and that interacts, and it makes the hydrochloric acid come out of the walls, goblet cells in the stomach, and then the acidity goes down and to a certain point, and then there's negative feedback and tells the through the nervous system to stop putting out gastrin, kind of halts the process. Similarly, with CCK, that's stimulated when it recognizes that there's lipid in the system, because that's going to stimulate the lipase. At the same time, we get what do we get? We get CCK, lipase, and when there's no more CCK produced, well, and there's no more lipid sensed, then that's halted with a negative feedback. Secretin, when secretin is released, that's telling that coming out of the stomach is this very low acidic chyme, and we need bicarbonate into the small intestine to neutralize that acid before it harms the small intestine. So a lot of things happening there around reacting to and keeping things um, stable and digesting the macronutrients. Okay, a series of questions here that um, that are about the level that you'll see on the test, and this is just chosen from the 5 chapters that this test is going to cover. Let's see, a characteristic of that's most typical of chronic disease. Chronic disease uh, does not happen really quickly. It's gradual. And an example of a chronic disease is a deficiency of a given nutrient. Perhaps it's vitamin D or calcium, which is not uncommon, unfortunately, uh, when um, when people um, late in life don't have strong bones anymore because maybe they weren't having enough, getting out in the sun enough, or having food that has a decent amount of calcium, then bones don't stay strong, and that's very difficult to reverse. If a child develops a strong dislike for noodle soup after she consumes the soup when she was sick with the flu, then her reaction is an example of a negative association. Okay? Some of the others you might think of um, how those associations are with an eating something in our eating patterns. For instance, this one: a person eats a bowl of oatmeal every day is most likely a food choice based on mostly like a habit. A nutrient is needed by the body and must be supplied by foods. Okay, that's an essential nutrient. And a nutrient, which is the macronutrient among these. And there's 3 macronutrients. That means that we need to get it we need them in the greatest amount. So about grams, not milligrams or micrograms. So that's protein. The others are needed in several orders of magnitude less. You know what? I suppose one could say that water is also a macronutrient. Um, let's see, nutrient that's organic. Okay. So everything is organic, meaning we could that does not have carbon. That's the main thing. And that's vitamin C. And essential nutrient is one that right there cannot be made in sufficient quantity by the body. All right, so uh, there's not a whole lot of math in our course here, and this is the only kind of mathematical operations, and that's based on the conversion factors, or knowing that protein and carbohydrate, when consumed, when burned, produce 4 kcals per gram of either protein or carbohydrate. With fat, it's 9 kcals per gram. So that's what you need to know for this example. Let's say a rate reduction regime calls for a daily intake of 1400 kcals, which includes 30 grams of fat. Approximately what percentage of the total is contributed by the fat? So how do we do this? So we figure out how many kcals is that 30 grams of fat going to produce? And so it's 30 kcals times 9 kcals per gram divided by that total. And if you do that, so on the on a test, there'll be one or maybe two questions like this, and you have a There's a calculator that's in the lockdown browser. It's up at the top. If you didn't take a lockdown browser test that requires using a calculator, so there's one there, and you could punch this in, just having in mind, or jotting it down on a scrap paper. That if you use a scrap paper, that's fine, and it's let's get to at the end. I think there's a prompt that says, "Did you use scrap paper?" Show it. Okay, so here's that what I just stated there. 30 grams of fat times 9 is the conversion factor, 9 kcals per gram of fat. Then divide that by the total, and divide by, I said that already. Divided by the total comes out times 100% of 19.3%. And there's variations on how a question like this could be, and it's all really based on just thinking through, reasoning, and knowing those 3 conversion factors, right? So the fat is 9 kcals per gram, carbohydrate and protein are just 4 kcals per gram. And though, so and that just mentions also alcohol. Alcohol does burn. We do burn alcohol if we take in a certain amount of alcohol, and that gives us 7 kcals per gram, somewhere in the middle. Problem with alcohol is we don't metabolize it fast enough, and if we get too much alcohol, that goes to our liver, and if it's not metabolized fast enough, it can convert into fat in the liver, and that's a big problem. That's if we have fat accumulation in the liver. Okay, that statement describes the composition of most foods. So hopefully you're getting, by thinking and doing the activities in the diet and wellness, plus you get a feel for if you're looking at a package or seeing that analysis of how much protein, how much fat, how much carbohydrate is given in a given food, you'd know that the only one that makes sense here is that most foods contain a mixture of the 3 energy nutrients, although most of the time only 1 or 2 may be prominent. So any food, it's nice to think about this. If you're eating avocado, perhaps you think, okay, what's in here? Now, first of all, fruits and vegetables, a majority water, but then if we think about the nutrients, what is that? Is it a lot of protein? Probably not. There's probably some. Is it mainly carbohydrate? Probably not. For avocado, it's kind of the exception among vegetables that it's high in fat, but it's healthy fat. All right, vitamins. So in general, is an overview in that in chapter 2. Later on, of course, we talk more about vitamins, but there's 13 vitamins. There's 9 water soluble and 4 fat soluble. Scientific method. Tentative solution to a problem is a hypothesis. All right. So this one is about a study. So you're asked to help a top nutrition researcher to conduct a human study on vitamin C. And as the subjects walk into the lab, you distribute all of the vitamin C pill bottles to the girls and all the placebo bottles to the boys. The researcher instantly informs you that there are two errors in your research practice. And what steps should you have taken to conduct the study correctly? So that's strange. You wouldn't do that to just select the girls to give the vitamin C. That's, of course, bias. Um, and it's supposed to be randomized. Plus, the best studies is called being blinded. The researchers don't know, so so therefore they won't be biased by which one is receiving the intervention or not. So you should prevent that researcher, actually the PI, should have informed and trained them better. Protect um, preventing yourself from knowing which pills are in which bottles and distributing them randomly to the subjects. An increase in exercise accompanied by a decrease in body weight is an example of. So that's it's a correlation, and it's a negative correlation. So increase exercise, decrease weight, and it's a correlation. And I just read an interesting article by, who I mentioned there, David Katz, Dr. David Katz. He said lots of times in nutrition, he's an MD and nutrition scientist, very experienced. He wrote an article saying, well, correlations in human studies, especially in nutrition, lots of them are correlations, but the correlations are so clear and reproducible, and we may not have a study that proves causation, but because the correlations are so strong and reproducible, it's almost as if the correlation is a causation. But sometimes you get messed up by saying this is correlated and that's a causation. So we have to be hesitant as good scientists and observers to be careful about saying this causes that. At first, there's a correlation. What's the purpose of the recommended daily allowance and adequate intake? Okay, so that's the RDA and the AI. So a lot of acronyms we had there. So what's the purpose? They're certainly setting nutrient goals, and it is for individuals. So the difference is we could look at populations, but the reason to set these is to provide at least some with some good assurance, with statistically valid for individuals. Which statement is true about nutrient intakes? So let's see, high intakes are always safer than lower. Intakes near the EAR, that's the average requirement, the estimated average requirement, decrease the risk of deficiency. So if you remember, there's they show bell curves. The estimated average is right in the middle of the bell curve. And some populations don't need all that, some need more of it. The RDA is set way out at the 98th percentile, so that everyone that gets the RDA should be covered by that amount for that particular nutrient. So all of these are not, if you look at them, they're not true, not necessarily true. But one that is true is intakes above the upper limit put an individual at risk of toxicity. So sometimes you got to be strategic in how you answer a multiple choice question. Some of them could be close, but there should be one that really stands out as the correct answer. Percentage of kcals intakes for protein, fat, and carbohydrate that are thought to reduce the risk of chronic diseases are known as what? Okay, so these are recommended amounts of the macronutrients, and it's an acronym that's hard to remember, the AMDR, the accepted macronutrient distribution ranges. Okay, so there are ranges for each of the three, and the next question is asking about one of those ranges. So the AMDR for fat is what? So the ranges for the three are here, and the one for fat is the 20 to 35% of total kcals. Okay, that's what the percentage is. Let's see, which is for carbohydrate? That would be this one. It's carbohydrate. These are, um, again, the average macronutrient distribution ranges, the recommended. And what's remaining for protein? For protein, it's this one. Sequences in developing a nutrient deficiency. So it's one of these things that take a while. It's usually chronic. So we don't see, if we didn't have iron for even a few weeks, we may not feel it very much. It'll take time, especially something like calcium or vitamin D. It'll take a much longer time till any kind of symptoms are seen. So certainly, we don't see overt signs right away. Declining stores, yes, and you wouldn't see this fast. You wouldn't see that fast either. So it's between no adequate nutrient. So there's okay, so this is a sign. So inadequate intake, and then some abnormal functioning, and then only later on the progression of a deficiency do you see overt signs. That's the point there. Most appropriate person to consult for nutrition information. If you have a good MD, then they may be a good person to talk about nutrition. But it's the AMA even admits they really haven't trained for a long time doctors enough in nutrition. It's only more recently that medical schools do have more training. And so it's actually the registered dietitian. They have to keep up their license with newest findings and newest clinical practices. A registered dietitian, and it's called a registered dietitian nutritionist. So it's not dietitian. They added nutritionist because dietitian doesn't sound as authoritative as it really is. So they added only in the last 10 years dietitian and nutritionist to that title. And in most states, there's no official registered nutritionist. It's a dietitian and nutritionist. Let's say something here. They could be very good nutrition consultants, but they may not be like board certified, but there certainly could be a good nutrition consultant. Okay, the planning principle, we said there's 6 of them, and 5 of them are mentioned here. Which one is amount is sufficient to maintain health? Okay, that's adequacy. Pretty clear. Nutrient-dense foods refers to what? Again, that's provides a lot of nutrients per kcals. Kcals generally are easy to get. And a lot of people get cacao with too much sugar. Unfortunately, not a lot of nutrients along with those sugars, like sugar sweetened drinks, sodas, and stuff. You get a lot of sucrose or corn syrup, um, and not a whole lot of other things. You get water, but lacking a whole lot of other uh, nutrients. Fruit group. So what would you guess is the fruit group? So fruits don't have a lot of minerals. Vegetables, on the hand, do, on the other hand, do. But so you would go with A and C is in the fruit group. Hmm. Um, I think this was mentioned maybe once in Mind Tap. I don't know if so. I probably won't put a, but it's good to know. Food list, or sometimes called an exchange list, they're developed for um, diabetes. So they're decreasing or keeping the glucose or sucrose or carbohydrate low, replacing it with more complex carbohydrates that is more slowly releasing in the bloodstream. We'll learn more about type 1, type 2 diabetes, and a very important topic later on, um, chapter 9. All right, so there's a slight difference, but an important difference between when a food is enrichment versus fortified. And it's between those two here that calcium. We see orange juice, grapefruit juice um, it says what? It could say enriched and it could be fortified. So fortifying, that means kind of increasing an amount that's already there to fortify something. Enrich means it wasn't there before, but we're putting it in there. For instance, what orange juice doesn't usually have calcium, so that would be enriched with calcium. They do that with lots of um, orange juice or grapefruit juice enriched. But in this case, uh, hmm, this is well, that's right, fortified. It wasn't there before. Is that right? No, this answer is wrong. It is enriched. So it's enriched. It wasn't there before. Fortified means it increases in amount. Sorry about that. According to nutrition labeling, which two minerals must be on. So if you look at labels enough, you would kind of think through and probably get this right. Hardly ever see these on a label. Don't see these on a label here and there. No, it's these two. So if you look on any kind of packaged food that has nutrition facts, you'll see that they have listing whether there's some calcium, some iron, or maybe say less than or not a significant amount. Food labels, they express the daily values. So that percent of the recommended amount, that's what it's showing. It might be 5% of the recommended fiber or 50% of the vitamin C, that kind of thing. Okay, process by which food is broken down and absorbed. That's the digestion. Okay, chyme. We mentioned chyme. Chyme comes out of the stomach. What is it? It's partially digested. It's going into the small intestine. Okay, so it is semi-solid. It's partially digested. and it's released from the stomach into the small intestine. So that's choice B. The others are missing something or just not going to have undigested food passing all the way down into here, the later part of the small intestine. Pancreatic juices, this is pancreas, that's in the small intestine already, that you get the pancreatic juices. Okay. So chewed food combined with saliva that passes from the esophagus to the stomach. So before we called it chyme, there was another word for this mass of food that's kind of has a bunch of saliva and partially chewed, and that word is bolus. Bolus. B-O-L-U-S. Bolus. When it comes out of the stomach, it's called the chyme. Mucus in the stomach. What does that do? That protects the stomach from gastric juices. So gastric juices we know are acidic. They're somewhere around pH 2 from the HCl that is put into the stomach when protein is present to help digest a bit the protein, but also that acidity is makes it optimal for proteases to work on protein. They work at low pH. For instance, it activates the acid, that is, pepsinogen is a proenzyme into pepsin. Pepsin is one of the major proteases in the stomach, digest protein. HCl in the stomach, just said that, so it optimizes the acidity for the proteases to work. So it also could, it denatures the protein also, opens it up more for the enzymes to work on it. Nice mechanism there. The process by which bile acts on fat so that enzymes can attack the fat is known as emulsification. So fat when it's in an aqueous environment, which most of our body is aqueous, water-based, fat is going to clump up, and to spread that out, the bile salts, the bile opens that up so that the fat can be digested, mostly triglycerides, right? That's the major lipid that we get from foods, triglycerides. And in chapter 6, you learn a bit about lipids, that food lipids at least, they're mainly triglycerides, which is a backbone of glycerol with 3 fatty acids. Fatty acids have different number of carbons, typically 12 to 14 carbons, with just a methyl group on the end, and they have some number of double bonds, that is points of unsaturation. They could be none, they could be 1, they could be 3, they could be 6, and those are the omega acids, right? Those essential fatty acids, the omega-3 and omega-6. Okay, just a few more I have here. Let's see, which class of nutrients require the least amount of digestion? So I qualified this by saying assumes vitamins do not require digestion. Okay. Okay. Well, the class of nutrients. So vitamins don't need digestion. What they do need is to be released from food. So there does need to be digestion that goes on to release the vitamins. Unless you take a vitamin supplement, then it's available. But if we talk about other things, then it's the simple carbohydrates. Where do they get digested? They start to be digested right in our mouth. Sucrose and lactose could be starting to be digested in our mouth even. And that's why some carbohydrates are dangerous if we're taking a lot of them, because they get into our bloodstream very quickly because the digestion is already happening in the mouth. So simple carbohydrates, that's in confections and whatnot that have. Okay, what's important about the intestinal villi crypts? So that's in the small intestine, and they have incredible amount of surface area, but they also have a lot of enzymes in the secretion of enzymatic, rather intestinal enzymes in their secretions. Okay, synthesis of chylomicrons. So you learn about this also in chapter 6. Chylomicrons is how we start to transport fats, right? Free fatty acids. They make these pretty large masses of fatty acids, which go into not the bloodstream, but that other place. What's the other place? Not the bloodstream, but it is in the what? Two places that we absorb. Some things get absorbed right into the bloodstream. The others, like the fat, the chylomicrons, get absorbed into which system is that? Anybody know? Okay, I think there's another question coming up with that, but you should know that. It's not the blood system, it's the other system that's usually shown in yellow. Blood system.
Lymphatic.
What?
Lymphatic.
Right, very good. Thank you. Lymphatic system. Okay, lymphatic system, that one does not have a pump. It just kind of moves with kind of when stuff is in it, it moves kind of up until they form these chylomicrons that get slowly put out into the bloodstream. Lymphatic system, very good. So the lymphatic system also is thought to be kind of a bit of a dumping ground, a waste collection also, but very important for absorption of fatty nutrients, also fat-soluble vitamins, lymphatic system. What's the function of the intestinal microvilli? So that is for absorption and transport. So we're transporting from the GI tract into either the lymphatic system or into the bloodstream. So a huge amount of surface area that does that kind of thing. To assist the process of digestion and absorption, it's usually best to what? So there's a lot of unproven conversation around this. What's best to assist digestion and absorption? And it's sometimes it's even debatable what's the best practice and whether there is a single best practice, or is it kind of maybe it's our anatomy or how we condition ourselves what's best to eat several snacks a day so that our system is not overwhelmed, combine different foods to enhance absorption, avoid eating meat and fruit at the same meal to prevent competition, take enzyme pills or powders periodically so that the system can rest and rejuvenate, or eat only one type of food at each meal to avoid overstimulation of acid. So some of these don't have any proof, and maybe a couple of these could be correct. But there are certain foods that certainly enhance the absorption of nutrients. For instance, our calcium absorption, um, influenced by vitamin D or iron and vitamin C, we'll see later, have a real synergistic effect on absorption. Okay. Most metabolically active organ. So the liver is an incredible organ with so many things it does. So it stores a lot of vitamins and glycogen. We'll find it it detoxifies. We didn't cover that yet, but it's a huge detoxification organ. It regularly gets signals to put out nutrients, and of course it stores a lot of nutrients also. So it's always very, very active. That's why liver disease, fatty liver is so serious to maintaining homeostasis. Let's see the primary role of normal thriving intestinal bacteria. So this is sometimes called now the microbiome and some other names. The so helps degrade meat and dairy, produces compounds that influence energy and immunity, synthesizes vitamin D, synthesizes several amino acids, aids in absorption of several nutrients. So the role of a thriving intestinal bacterial population. There are some nutrients that are produced and some protection, immunity protection that's being found. It's still an area that's new things are being learned, but it does produce some amount of B12 and some biotin, so 2 B vitamins, and also has this not completely understood, but bolsters immune system. That is a thriving, healthy microbiome. And how do we influence the microbiome? Well, it's thought to be mostly having good fiber, regular fiber, the 2 different types of fiber in our diet. Substance known to produced by intestinal bacteria. So I mentioned those two vitamins, B12 and biotin. It's not clear of any others really produced by intestinal bacteria. All right, important 2 systems that coordinate all digestive and absorption processes. And you should be able to pick this one out. It's nervous and endocrine system. Okay, so they're coordinating all these things. So endocrine, those are those hormones, at least those 3 really important ones we talk about for GI health, and the signals, the feedback signals with nervous system. Which substance functions to control the release of HCl, and so that's one of the hormones, and that is gastrin. And you should recognize the others. Yeah, so in the, it's probably mentioned, but we mentioned much more about the 2 hormones that influence the levels of glucose in the bloodstream, whether it put out some glucose is glucagon, whether this making the cells and tissues absorb glucose, and that's insulin. So insulin and CCK role with um, fats, lipids, um, and secretin. Secretin influences the pancreas to put out all that wonderful pancreatic juice with a whole bunch of enzymes for carbohydrate and um, even what else? Some proteases and even carbohydrate enzymes. And another one related to GI hormones, substance that stimulates the pancreas to release bicarbonate-rich juice, and that's secretin. So that's bicarbonate neutralizes the chyme coming out of the stomach into the small intestine. It's very, very acidic in the stomach, comes out, and secretin stimulates the pancreas to uh, pump in bicarbonate. The presence of fat in the intestine stimulates cells of the intestinal walls that release. Okay, so fat intestines stimulate. What's needed here is the cholecystokinin. Okay, that one. As soon as we hear lipid, we should think CCK, and that influences to get that get bile moving. Where does bile come from? But bile is actually produced in the liver. It's stored in the. Where's bile stored? Anybody remember? In the gallbladder. Bile is stored in the gallbladder. It's not made in the gallbladder, it's made in the liver, but stored in the gallbladder. So someone that has maybe diseased gallbladder and had to have a gallbladder removed, it's not completely uncommon, but so their digestion of fat is a little bit hindered, and they have to watch their intake of fat because it's a little slower getting the bile into the small intestine. So glucose, blood sugar, dextrose, a lot of names for glucose, and it's that is the monosaccharide. That's what we convert all carbohydrates into useful energy by making them into glucose. Glucose then later on in chapters 7 and 8, I think, or 8 and 9, 7 and 8. 7 and 8, we talk about energetics and metabolism, the conversion of glucose to ATP, all those steps. In which the tissues the glycogen stored? The glycogen stored in the liver and in muscle. Glycogen, that's the storage of glucose. And what are these? Cellulose, pectin, hemicellulose, and lignin. These are all fiber. Primary means of digestion of soluble fibers in the large intestine. Large intestine. So not much further digestion happens in the large intestine, and it's really from our healthy bacteria. And that's sort of related to this immunity enhancement idea that some of the fiber that we don't necessarily digest. We don't have those enzymes. It goes through us. There's a lot of benefits to fiber, but also the fiber is thought to be worked on by some of the good bacteria and produce some compounds that are absorbed and are good for our immune system. These various intermediates compounds. Blood glucose concentration falls. What pancreatic enzyme stimulates the release of stored, and that's the glucagon. Glycemic index. Actually, this is later on. I don't think it's in this chapter. So, glycemic index, though, is the we're taking in carbohydrate. How quickly does that carbohydrate get metabolized and be put into the bloodstream as glucose? That's so foods are given this glycemic index number. If a high number, then blood glucose goes in, carbohydrate goes into glucose into our bloodstream very quickly. We don't want that. We want slow release into the bloodstream. So it's a way to rank potential increase in blood glucose. Something like white bread is very high glycemic index, as opposed to something like the carbohydrate in vegetable or in whole wheat bread, much lower glycemic index, slower release of glucose into the bloodstream. Dietary lipids are mostly triglycerides. Okay. All right. So that was a lot of questions there. Helpful to think about all these different concepts that you probably see very similar to a lot of these, but also things that we've just discussed there briefly are what's been covered in these first five chapters. So comments and questions, anything?
I have a question.
Sure.
Do we have a time limit for 40 question on the exam?
A time limit, yes, 100 minutes. I would say 100 minutes. And usually that's okay, Shan. Bye-bye. Yes, there's usually students don't take the entire of the time. In my experience, there's usually plenty of time. If you think about that, 100 minutes and 40 questions. If you know the stuff pretty well, then multiple choice questions, might take a minute or less than 2 minutes for sure. And then you can navigate. You can go back and forth among the questions, and of course it's required, and that's why we took that practice exam using the lockdown browser to check for everybody being no cheating, academic integrity. Good question. I should have said that. 100 minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Well, so getting through the rest of it until just for the rest of the week. So Saturday it opens up. It's available anytime you want between as soon as Saturday happens until midnight. 11:59 p.m. Monday. Right, so you could choose to take that time. That 100 minutes to be in a quiet place and do your best you can on the exam.